Hello and welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Sales. I am Kasey Jones.
And I'm Ashleigh.
And today we're going to talk about something that is coming up a lot. And we've had some kind of personal experience with, and it's how to call someone out online. And when we say call someone out, we mean like you see somebody say something or do something that you don't feel is quite right, and you let them know.
I think we should be clear. We're talking about stuff that could be potentially discriminatory, harassment, insulting language. And I think for the purposes of this episode, talking about relatively minor things. We're not talking about stuff where, for example, you are sexually harassed or something like that, and you put that person on blast on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
We're not talking about major things in that.
And we're not talking about dangerous or threatening things,
Agreed.
Right? Yeah, this is stuff where it's like someone does something where you're like, I find that kind of unethical.
Or, I really wish you'd phrase that differently. Or I really wish I know you are a great ally of diversity, and yet you just launched this new project and it's nothing but white guys.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about why you might want to or need to. I mean, we've kind of just mentioned that, but look, I think things have changed a lot, particularly in the last few months where, and in a lot of ways for good, but it's also, things are contentious, and I think we've all been emboldened to take a stronger, more public stance when we see something that is not okay or that we disagree with. And, sometimes we see something that really just doesn't sit right, and you kind of just can't let it go. And it's important, one, to educate people on all of this, right? Sometimes people say things and they just don't realize, right? And we're going to talk about in another episode when you don't just realize and someone calls you out on something.
Because I was going to say, there's two sides to the same coin. This is part one of a two-parter. Part two is going to be what happens if you get called out, because part of growth is having these hard conversations where you call someone else on something that maybe they didn't know wasn't a good thing to do, and where people call you on something where you didn't realize it wasn't a good thing to do.
Yeah.
We're human. It happens. We have to give each other the benefit of the doubt and the opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
So it's really, how do you call someone out for the purposes of growth?
Yes.
And I think that's an important thing to have. That has to be the intent. It can't be to make someone look bad, feel bad. It has to be with the intent of growth. If you want to make someone look or feel bad, that's a different thing altogether.
Yes. And just know that even if your intent is growth and education, people get very defensive, and they will often assume that your intention is to humiliate or to shame. And you've got to weigh that risk. I've had one experience where I called someone out who I know to be a better ally than what they were doing. And the response was that I was intent on publicly shaming this person.
They felt that you were publicly intent on shaming them.
Yes, that's what they were pretty convinced of that. And that's the tough part, right? Like, and this is something that I've definitely learned is you can only control what you do. You cannot control how somebody is going to respond to it. And no, I don't think if you feel strongly about something that should necessarily hold you back, but you've got to know that that's a strong possibility.
Yeah. It's just like, it's in my mind, it's the same thing, kind of like cold calling. You gotta separate yourself from the fact that there's a good chance if you pick up the phone and you are straight cold calling someone, the person on the other end might tell you to fuck off.
Yeah.
It might happen, but it has nothing to do with you. They're sensitive on this. It's their boss just chewed them out. Their dog just died. They're stressed out of their mind. You can't control them, but you can control what you do. So what do you do? So Kasey, you've done this more than I have.
Yeah.
I've luckily only had to do this a couple times, but like, what are the rules for how to do this well so it has the best chance of being received in the way that it is intended?
Well, I got to be honest. I don't know that I've learned that because I don't think I've ever had it received well. And I'll give you a couple of different examples. It's like one of the things that I've called people out on. There's this trend on LinkedIn now where I've only seen white men do it, where they take a tweet that went viral months ago and they take the exact copy from that tweet and they post it on LinkedIn as their own post. And because I'm really active on Twitter, I've spotted this multiple times. And I will usually respond in the comments with like, hey, this is not cool. You're plagiarizing this, with a link to the original tweet. And not once have they said, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me give credit where credit is due, or anything like that. And it's usually, I've been blocked because of it, or just ignored, or sort of dismissed. I think, some of the other times it's like the story that I just mentioned, where someone who I really respected and who I thought could do better, I called out publicly, but I tried to be very respectful, and I tried to say, hey, I support everything that you do, and I am a big fan of yours, but I'm really disappointed in this, and here's why. And the response was incredibly negative, and he was sure that I was trying to humiliate him, which I certainly was not. And I made the decision to be public about it because he has a very, very public brand.
And I mean, to be clear, you decided to do this just because I'm familiar with the situation.
Yeah.
You decided to respond to his announcement in the comments. So it's not like
Yeah.
you published your own thing and tagged him.
Correct.
You just responded in kind.
Yeah. And I did it publicly because he has a very, very public brand. And I thought that if I sent a private message, because this has happened where I've tried to engage in these discussions privately, and publicly nothing changes. There's no changes that get made. And I mean, I will be very honest with everybody that's listening. There are multiple people in the B2B sales world, men, that really do not like me because of this.
And I know women who have been called out for behavior that was either too feminist or not feminist enough.
Yeah.
Who people will not do business with them for that reason. So you're never going to make everybody happy.
No.
That's not the goal. But it's understanding against the intent by it and separating yourself from the outcome.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to bring up, is like, if you're going to call somebody out, be ready to walk away if you need to.
Yeah.
Like if it's not worth walking away from this person over, maybe you don't call them out.
Yeah.
The other side of that is the softer way to do this is softer, but also means the effects can be not as strong, is to do it private, one-to-one.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
like I had a situation where I was involved in a project, and they released the first, round of this project publicly. And I found it really interesting that despite the people who were running this project being a diverse pair of men, everyone who was released in the first batch was white men. And I pinged them, and it wasn't even like hey, I know you've got at least one woman because I'm involved. So please don't take this as why wasn't I in the first batch, because there's no ego here. But it's, hey, I know you are great advocates for diversity. Why wasn't any of that in the first 5?
Yeah.
And the response was, we thought about it. We thought it was more important to get views first, get people to understand the format, and then we'd be super diverse down the line. And their response was very kind. It was like, we understand your concern. You raised some points we hadn't considered. We'll think about that going forward. Go from there. And I was a little disappointed. I was like, I really was kind of hoping they would have swapped someone or something, but I felt heard. I felt seen.
Yeah.
I think they understood which was all I could do. But at the same time, it was also like, if they had responded back and blown it off, I would have said, I don't want to be involved anymore. I was ready to do that. But I also chose to do that privately because I had a relationship with these guys, with these people, versus if I did it publicly. Honestly, I'll be honest, like, this is something where Kasey and I differ. I'm perpetually terrified of getting into a fight getting in a fight on LinkedIn. Like, I have no problem going after a troll, but I don't want to get involved in an ego match with some people on Twitter. I don't have the time or the energy to do it.
Well, I don't get into an ego match, and I never engage with a troll ever.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to argue online, I just don't do that. But I will call out people when I say, like, hey, I really disagree with this. And I'll also tell you, like, probably the first glaring situation of this is I was asked for feedback about why women didn't want to engage in a particular event. And I gave very, very detailed, very honest feedback, but it was kind and a lot of, like, ideas of how they could change things. And it was so roundly dismissed. And now neither of those people really talk to me. And one of them, I am under the impression, really actively dislikes me. And so that's the other thing you have to know is, like, oftentimes you do it in private and nothing changes and they'll still really dislike you. So
yeah,
you have to decide, one, what can you live with? And two, you also, I was naive. They asked me for feedback, so I thought they honestly wanted it. They didn't.
Yeah.
They really, really didn't.
They didn't want feedback. They wanted praise.
They wanted praise, or they wanted very
soft answers.
They wanted softballs. They wanted me to be like, you're doing a really great job. Women should love this experience. And
maybe give us more vegetarian food.
No, I mean, literally, I gave them 3 pages of feedback on this whole experience. And the immediate response was, you didn't mention anything about swag. Should we get t-shirts or water bottles? And I was like, are you kidding? Like, you missed this. Like, what the, and I didn't say any of that. And I think that's the big thing is, like, you have to know that sometimes often it's going to be received really, really negatively, especially depending on who you give this feedback to.
And what you're giving feedback on.
But I also do wonder, sometimes people are going to react really negatively, but that doesn't mean that they won't actually learn something.
Yep.
And I am a big believer that, like, if we always kept our mouth shut when we see something that is wrong, literally nothing would change.
Yep.
And I don't need anything from these people to begin with. They never did anything for me before. So I feel better. I don't know. I feel more at peace by being honest about these things than I would feeling like I had to subjugate my ethics to appease their ego.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because it really depends what you're calling people out on. If you're calling someone out on a best practice, you could be pretty much as vicious as you want, because that's completely devoid. But the moment it's tied into someone's identity or a passion project, be ready. Emotions are going to flare.
And look, what I find particularly appalling is some of the people that I'm talking about are the people that love publicly shaming SDRs for sending them bad messaging.
Oh, do not. This is not a place for that.
No, and I think that is one of my biggest, like, I will get on my soapbox. I think it is so incredibly wrong.
It's toxic.
It's so toxic, and there's this increasing trend of leaders in our industry that do this. And even when it's not, they include the person's personal information, they tag them in it. And oftentimes it's not like they sent a really screwed up message. It's like they sent a message that person just didn't like. And it is so vile and so inappropriate. So that's the other thing about this. I don't feel bad because I really don't respect how they handle these things either.
Yeah. And I'll say this, and that's a good example. Like if you like, as a sales dev expert, which feels weird saying that about myself, as a sales dev expert, I get a lot of bad prospecting. I do. I get probably 5 to 10 a day between LinkedIn and my email. If someone's really bad, I don't put them on blast on Twitter or wherever else. I respond to them and tell them this is why you're bad. And it's usually led with, I'm not your prospect. Here's why.
Yep.
By the way, I train people on this. Please consider this when you go forward, because in my mind, that's my duty to help them. Yep. If I don't think they're going to listen, I'll go on LinkedIn, take 5 seconds, find their manager, and I'll tell their manager, hey, not sure if you're writing the emails or your SDR is, but this ain't working. And if you'd like help, and I'll be honest, I've gotten a deal from that. I did have someone actually hire me to come in and coach because I was like, hey, like, no tea, no shade. This is broken. This is going to hurt people, hurt your business. Putting things on LinkedIn, and I understand why to call out bad toxic practices. I get that. But leaving the names on is where I draw the line.
I think it's so inappropriate and so toxic, to your point.
And we wonder why there's a high burnout rate in sales because of stuff like that.
It is.
So, I mean, you just made it harder for that person to find a job because the next employer is going to Google search. And if they see, ooh, this major sales influencer tagged them at describing everything wrong with an email, that's a hard sell.
And also, I'll say, it bums me out because when I was an SDR, my first VP of sales, he would, anytime one of the SDRs would get yelled at or the VP of sales would get an email from a prospect being like, screw you, I hate this email, blah, blah, blah. He would then talk to all of us and be like, being an SDR is hard. If you're not pissing someone off on a regular basis, you're not doing your job. And they were real advocates for us. And yes, they would always be like, here's what we can learn from this. Or sometimes they'd be like, this guy's just a jerk. But it was always protecting the SDR. We don't do that anymore. And the fact that sales leaders take this strategy, I know we're on a totally different tangent, but it makes me incredibly angry.
It does. And I'll say this, like there's a way again, it comes down to when and how to call someone out online. There's a way to call someone out. And I have gotten meetings. I've told the story several times. I was on a call and this prospect was convinced I was an idiot. Absolutely convinced. Was borderline verbally abusive to me. I tried for 20 minutes to try and get this guy to, and he just could not understand what I was saying. And I was being real technical. I was dropping all my smart bombs. It was great. I was very proud of that call. He wasn't listening. He was convinced that I had said something else and he just was not listening. Hung up the phone, walked over to my AE, said, hey, this is a good prospect. He thought we were this, we're not. I explained that to him until I was blue in the face. He didn't listen. Call him, apologize, tell him I'm new and get the meeting. Our rep did. Hung up the phone, came right back over. He's like, yeah, that guy's a bit of a jerk. Don't worry. You're still going to get credit for the meeting. I'm sorry I had to deal with that, but thank you for bringing it to my attention. So it's the sort of thing, there are ways to do these things that internally protect your people and ramp them up. Amp them up, show them they have value, they have all these things. I mean, I used to tell my team, if you're not getting at least one angry person a month, you're leaving stuff on the table.
Without a doubt.
That's fine. You can get people can be angry at you. But you can't cross the line into threatening. And I have had to fire someone because they threatened a prospect. That's the only time in my life I've had to spot fire someone. To being harassing or discriminatory. Those are lines you can't cross. But up to that point, you can piss people off. It's not the end of the world. As long as it's rare, you can do these things. Yeah. Putting someone on blast online for an email that, let's be honest, in a lot of companies, SDRs don't even write their own emails.
Exactly.
At this point is very, very hurtful in a way that seems punitive and petty that I don't like. And at the same time, I don't engage with those posts because I don't want to give them any amplification. And at the same time, I'm not going to convince them that doing that was a bad idea.
No.
So in that point, if anything,
you responding will make you their next target.
Bingo. And if anything, at this point, just to call back to our last episode on heroes, one of my favorite Ruth Bader Ginsburg quotes is sometimes it helps to be a little bit deaf.
Yep. That's one thing I always say is like when somebody is being unnecessarily aggressive or critical, I like to play dumb and pretend like I don't understand that they're insulting me, and they get very frustrated with that.
It's fun. I affectionately call that my dumb blonde play,
Yeah.
and it's so much fun to do in the moment. It's like, oh, really? Oh,
Oh, yeah,
thank you so much for telling me that.
Well, that was always when I was a phone sales junkie a million years ago. When I would get someone who was really, really mean and starting to insult me, I would always do my sickeningly sweet voice, and I'd be like, "Thank you so much for that feedback. I hope you continue to have a really wonderful day." And then I would hang up, and it would drive them crazy, and half the time they would call back and complain. And
yeah, you can hear the steam coming out of their ears.
It was always very satisfying.
Yeah. All right. So in conclusion, if you're going to call someone out online, understand what you're walking into. And be ready to walk away. Understand that their reaction has nothing to do with you, but there is a good chance this person will not engage with you again. Is it worth it?
Is it worth it?
Is it worth it? That's fine. And that's going to change over the course of your career. I am much more willing to piss people off now than I was 2 years ago. Yes. Because I've got a stronger social brand. More people know who I am. It's now part of my brand to do this stuff, which is fun. Yes. Understand the dynamics of public versus private. Public being like where you're posting or where you're responding to a comment. Private being where it's just one-to-one, but it's more easily dismissed. And take the risk yourself. You know, think about it, consider it. Don't go off immediately. But the world is getting more and more open to this sort of stuff being called out. And if you are in a situation where someone is crossing those lines of being threatening or discriminatory or harassing, all bets are off. Protect yourself.
So thank you for listening. If you have stories about this or you want to ask questions, come find us on social, Other Side of Sales, pretty much everywhere. Also, if you have a story and you want to share about it, we are looking for content writers for guest blogs. So hit us up at hello@othersideofsales.com. We'd love to post your stories, amplify your voice. And also, we will be releasing the State of Sales survey very shortly. So go to the website, sign up for advance notice. And thanks for listening.
See you next week.